Last week, I uploaded a video covering the new Season 6 FCAR changes, and I mentioned how I felt like the FCAR might be the best weapon on the medium class. From that video, we received a ton of comments, with people voicing what weapon they thought was best. Hey everyone, it's Sam, and today we will be checking out the 4 main rifles on the medium class: the FCAR, the AKM, the Pike, and the Famas. Before we jump into anything, I want to personally give a big thank you to everyone who has checked out our channel and subscribed over the past 2 weeks. We are already at over 1,300 subscribers and over 33,000 views across our videos. This is insane, and we never thought we'd be where we are right now. So this past week, I spent a lot of time in World Tour and Team Deathmatch with the FCAR, the AKM, the Pike, and the Famas, to try and get a feeling of both the competitive and casual use of these weapons. Before I give any thoughts and ratings on these weapons, I wanted to approach them with the idea of how would these weapons perform if someone new or returning to the game used them? Would they have a fun time or find them too difficult? I feel like with all 4 of these weapons, if you really mastered one, it is totally possible to feel like that weapon is the best on the class. With all that out of the way, let's jump into the FCAR first, as it will be our baseline for testing. Like I mentioned earlier, I uploaded a video last week of the newly buffed FCAR, which had its recoil a bit more tuned. With that change, the FCAR now feels way more consistent, and it's significantly easier to stay on target when in sustained engagements. The reload speed on the FCAR also feels comfortable in terms of speed. According to the Finals wiki, the reload speed is the same regardless of how much ammo is left in the magazine, coming in at 2.10 seconds. One thing to note though is the magazine only holds 25 rounds, which is considerably smaller than some of the other weapons we will cover today. The damage fall-off range on the FCAR is not something to write off also. With a minimum range of 35 meters and a maximum of 40 meters, you can comfortably fight your opponents at a medium range without feeling any cost in damage. Finally, with damage, it's worth talking about the numbers. A shot to the body is coming in at 22 damage, and a shot to the head jumps to 33 damage. This means in just 7 body shots, you can take out a light, which is pretty solid giving its RPM of 540. When using the body damage and RPM, the FCAR comes in at 198 damage per second at its effective range, and a total of 550 damage per magazine. Next, let's hit on the most controversial rival of the FCAR, and that's the AKM. In my previous video, I said that newer players typically gravitated to the AKM, as the recoil was much simpler to control, and the damage was rewarding when hitting players in the head. However, if you were only hitting body shots, I'd recommend the FCAR. Here's the breakdown of the AKM in numbers. First, let's start with the damage. On the AKM, body shots come in at 20 damage and headshots come in at 30 damage. You'll notice this is significantly less than the FCAR, but we do have a faster fire rate at 600 RPM. Taking these numbers, we can find out that the AKM comes in at a DPS of 200 with a magazine that holds 32 rounds. This brings us to 640 damage per magazine, a pretty insane difference between the FCAR and the AKM. When taking a look at the damage falloff, we see the minimum distance kick in at 30 meters and a maximum at 37.5 meters, giving the AKM a little less range than the FCAR. Finally, with the reload speed, we have the same again for both empty and tactical reloads, coming in at 2.35 seconds, slightly slower than the FCAR. Next, let's hit on the final assault rifle in the medium class, the Famas. The Famas is unique as it is a burst rifle, so calculating some of its stats were more difficult and in full transparency may not be fully accurate. First, let's talk about the range, as this is where the Famas shines. Coming in at a medium range of 37.5 meters and a max of 47.5 meters, the Famas has no problem tackling longer range opponents. Next, let's talk about damage. The Famas has a pretty insane output, coming in at 23 damage per round to the body, and 34.5 damage per round to the head. Now, per round means exactly that, and each burst includes 3 rounds, and we get 9 bursts per magazine, bringing our magazine size up to 27. That means if you hit all body shots, you will do a crazy 69 damage per squeeze of the trigger. Nice. When talking about damage, we do need to talk about RPM. This is where things get complicated and possibly inaccurate, so please do not take these numbers to heart. From my testing, I found that I could get roughly 5 bursts or 15 rounds per second out of the weapon. Multiplying 15 by 60 gives us 900, and that's the number we will be using to calculate DPS. With that in mind, we can estimate a DPS of 345 and 621 damage per magazine. Finally, let's talk about reload speed. With a non-empty magazine, we have a reload of 2.15 seconds, which is just between the AKM and the FCAR. With an empty magazine though, we have 2.60 seconds, which is the slowest reload so far. With all of these numbers in mind, the FCAR holds the top spot in terms of DPS and damage per magazine. Finally, let's talk about the final rifle that was mentioned in our comments, the Pike. The Pike is actually a marksman rifle, intended for longer range engagements. Since it is meant for longer range, the damage falloff starts at 45 meters and ends at 50 meters. Next, let's get into the damage numbers. The Pike definitely packs a punch, clocking in at 50 damage per body shot and 75 damage to the head. With an RPM of 200 and a magazine of 12, this gives us a DPS of around 167 and a score of 600 damage per magazine. This is honestly a bit lackluster to me, and honestly a bit surprising to me as well. Next is reload speed, coming in at a 2.10 second tactical reload and a gross 3.25 seconds when fully empty. After crunching all the numbers and playing with each weapon this past week, I have the following conclusions. First, I think I have changed my own mind from thinking the FCAR is the best assault rifle. Again, from the perspective of the average player, I think the AKM actually creates such a simpler barrier to entry into the game. It has relatively similar damage stats, and with the extra magazine size, it actually allows the best of the best player to outshine FCAR players, assuming they hit each shot. The only sacrifice is a little bit of range and a negligible amount of reload speed that you realistically won't even experience. Second, while the Famas on paper is extremely strong, it's only as strong as the player wielding it. To me, it has a high skill floor to be effective, but with time and practice, you really can dominate as a medium with it. Finally, the Pike is just extremely situational, and for that, I just don't recommend it at this time. In the finals, you rarely find yourself in the ideal conditions all game, and there's just way too many potential drawbacks if you want to run it in a more competitive setting like World Tour or Ranked. With all of this in mind, here are my final ranks. At number 1, the AKM. At number 2, the FCAR. At number 3, the Famas. And at number 4, the Pike. One final note, none of these numbers mentioned earlier necessarily matter if you are uncomfortable with the weapon and cannot consistently hit your shots. The numbers we calculated today are from a perfect world scenario where you are at optimal range and hit every single shot, which just doesn't happen. In FPS games like the finals, the best players might break 50% accuracy consistently, and the average community hits maybe around 30 to 40%. What do you guys think about my ratings? Do you have another opinion? Or think I got something wrong? Let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to drop a like. For more of the finals content, make sure you subscribe. Also, check out Around the Arena, our weekly The Finals podcast. The first episode is live on this channel. Thank you guys again for everything, and I'll see you at the finals.